The Bahrain International Circuit is a track that's located in the Middle East, i.e. a region that is prone to being a bit on the warm order at some times of the year. That was proven over in nearby Qatar 12 years ago, which we all remember as being a pretty hit race for the drivers. It wasn't the hittest F1 race ever. That record is held by the 2005 Bahrain Grand Prix, a race which took place before two current Formula 1 drivers were even born. Yeah, don't worry, I feel old acknowledging that fact too. But the air temperature seen during this race? 42.5 degrees. Here's how that race unfolded. Championship leader Fernando Alonso stormed to pole in qualifying, starting ahead of the reigning champion Michael Schumacher in second. Trulli, Heidfeld and Webber rounded out the top five, with Ralf Schumacher, Klein, De La Rosa, who was standing in for Montoya, Raikkonen and Fisichella being the remaining drivers in the top 10, with the back half of the grid looking a bit like this. Button and Massa shared row 6 with Sato and Coulthard behind them on row 7, in 15th and 16th with Villeneuve and Montero, with the last four places being taken by Karthikeyan in 17th, Albers and Friesacker, who both had grid drops but moved forward from 19th and 20th to 18th and 19th, make it make sense, and finally Barrichello, who'd qualified 15th but also had a grid drop and lined up last. So 20 drivers on the grid, but only 19 of them took the start because Klein couldn't get away for the formation lap and then just never got going. So we're already one car down. But when the remaining 19 cars got off the line, Alonso kept the lead while Schumacher just managed to keep second place ahead of Trulli as further down the grid. Fisichella just avoided hitting the back of McLaren when he locked up later in the lap. So at the end of lap 1, not too much had changed in the top 8. Alonso led from Michael Schumacher, Trulli, Webber, Heidfeld, Ralf Schumacher, Raikkonen and Fisichella. A good start for Alonso then to keep the lead, but he did still have Schumacher right there and he had a bit of a look into turn 1, but he couldn't do anything. His teammate Rubens Barrichello, however, had been doing stuff. He had the best start of anybody, going from last to 11th by the end of lap 2. And that 11th would soon become 10th because Fisichella started having some problems and losing places due to an engine issue, which would spell the end of his race. He pitted to retire, but he didn't retire just then. He just drove through because he'd found power again after hitting the pit limiter somehow, but he was right back in at the end of lap 4 and actually retired. At the same time as the whole Fisichella thing was going on, Karthikeyan also retired from the race, so we're 3 cars down and we're only 4 laps in. Great start. Back at the front, and Schumacher was still keeping up with Alonso, still keeping within a second and setting the fastest lap, while the other Schumacher was currently embroiled in a midfield battle with trying to get past Heidfeld, which he finally did when the Williams driver went deep at turn 4, which then left Kimi Raikkonen as the next man to be stuck behind Heidfeld. Back at the front, and Michael still wasn't letting Alonso get away. He was only half a second behind him now on lap 11, but he just still wasn't quite close enough to make a move for the lead. And soon on lap 12, he wouldn't be anywhere near being able to make a move because he went off at turn 10 with what ended up being hydraulic issues, which spelled the end of the Germans' race, so that's now 4 cars down. That retirement meant Alonso now had a bit of room to breathe because he had a 3-second gap now to second place man Jarno Trulli. Webber was now in third with Ralf and Heidfeld 4th and 5th. Raikkonen was still behind Heidfeld in 6th, while Sato and De La Rosa ended the points paying positions. De La Rosa was trying to change the order and get past Sato, but his attempts thus far were proving unsuccessful, with the Japanese man holding strong in 7th place. It will be around lap 19 before the first pit stops happened, and that was the sole remaining Schumacher in the race that started all that. And honestly, it'll never not be strange to me to see a pit stop with no tire changes and just refueling. Yeah, because that was the regulations in 2005, 1 set of tires had to last the entire race. That rule got scrapped ahead of 2006. But the race leader followed suit, and at the end of lap 20, he pitted from a 4-second lead and emerged in 3rd place, while De La Rosa still couldn't get past Sato. He did go for it into turn 1 with a move which commentator James Allen said he was heading for Saudi Arabia because he went deep and thus didn't make a move, but he was trying. Meanwhile, at the end of said lap, Trulli and Webber headed for the pitch, which handed the lead back to Alonso, who ended up still having 4-ish seconds a lead to Trulli in net P2. At this point, it wouldn't be too long until their cars conked out in the Bahrain heat. This time it was Nick Heidfeld on lap 26. His engine was on its second race. That was another rule of F1 at this time. Engines had lasted throughout the last 2 races, and his engine was on the second one, the first race it did, being the previous round in Malaysia, which was another hit race, and in short his engine just could not cope with Malaysia and Bahrain, so it called it quits. Then the following lap Sato joined him in retirement because his brakes were completely gone. Meanwhile, up at the front, Alonso was having a pretty easy time of it, extending his lead out to 2.5 seconds to Trulli, while back at the De La Rosa show, after spending ages stuck behind Takuma Sato's BAR earlier, he was now stuck behind the the other BAR of Jenson Button. He did manage to get past him soon though. He finally made a move stick on a BAR on lap 33. Elsewhere, Raikkonen would find himself getting up to third. Webber was the man in third with the Finn right behind him, but the Aussie went off the track in the same place Michael did earlier, and he ended up dropping down to P5, so free position gained for Raikkonen. He was now upped into the podium paying positions. Meanwhile, back in the Della Rosa show, he's now trying to get past Rubens Barrichello. He made a dive on lap 38, but once again didn't make the move because he went deep. Again. While all this had been going on, Alonso had been leading calmly on his own, and he pitted from a 13-second lead at the end of lap 41. He only lost the place to Trulli, who followed to the end of the next lap, which handed the lead back to the Spaniard, who was looking set for his second win of the year. Jenson Button, meanwhile, on lap 43, wasn't quite looking for the race win, but he was rather having a look at getting past Rubens Barrichello, while Pedro Della Rosa, who hadn't pitted yet, managed to set the fastest lap of the race of a 1 minute 31.447, which was a new lap record, and which to this day remains as the racing lap record for F1 at the Bahrain International Circuit. The guy who at the time hadn't raced since 2002 set the fastest lap, which 20 years later remains unbeaten. Will 2025 finally be the year the record falls? Who knows, but at the end of lap 43 is when Raikkonen made his second pit stop and he exited just behind his teammate, still in net third. Button managed to get past Barrichello on lap 44, meaning he was now in fourth, but yet to stop again, behind Alonso leading from Trulli and Raikkonen. Barrichello was in fifth ahead of Ralf Schumacher, Webber and Della Rosa. Button did make his second pit stop at the end of lap 46, but he didn't exactly leave the pits because he had clutch problems. But he did manage to get the car going again. He did drive off from the pit box eventually, and he tried to take the rear jack with him, but he didn't leave the pit lane, so now we're 7 cars down. Lap 49 and we're back with the Della Rosa show. Della Rosa, who's still quick, is now hassling Mark Webber for 5th place. Honestly, imagine what he could have done in this race if he didn't keep trying to go to Saudi Arabia at turn 1. As Massa is busy passing the man who he replaced at Ferrari in 2006 because Barrichello, despite his great start, he at this point didn't have much pace. Back with Della Rosa though, Webber was heading on strong ahead of him, managing to hold the McLaren behind him and really just parking the whole of Australia on every apex, making that Williams car as wide as he could, but the defense had to fall eventually, and it did. Pedro Della Rosa finally managed to make the move out to turn 3 on the run to turn 4 on lap 55, and during all that, the previous lap, Jacques Villeneuve became the 8th and final retirement, with short breaks is what Ted Kravitz said. Wikipedia says suspension, but whatever. He retired. The race came to an end after 57 laps, with 12 drivers crossing the finish line, and Fernando Alonso being the first of them. Jarno Trulli and Kimi Raikkonen were joining him on the podium, with the point scorers being rounded off by Ralf Schumacher, Pedro Della Rosa, Mark Webber, Felipe Massa, and finally David Coulthard, who passed Rubens Barrichello for 8th on the final lap. And that's how the hatest ever F1 race unfolded. A race of attrition with 8 retirements, and every single one of them mechanical. Out of plain curiosity, does anybody remember watching this race live? I didn't. I was 4 and I didn't even know F1 existed, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.